Well, hello there. It's good to see you. And as you probably guessed from the title and the thumbnail, today we are going to be talking about Diablo, specifically the art of the Diablo game series. And this is a video that has been requested so much. I am so thrilled to this day that people still love and watch my Art of Mass Effect video Bookflip. I absolutely loved the experience of playing Mass Effect, the original trilogy, so many years ago, and getting to play Legendary again. And so it's fun that that's still something that a lot of people enjoy. That means a lot to me. And so I thought it would be so fun to revisit that format with a different series. I don't think that Diablo is a perfect series by any stretch of the imagination. Just like any big AAA game that's had so many installments, there's highs and lows. But this is volume 2 of their art books. And so this one looks at Diablo 2, which is probably my favorite. And it also looks at some of the side projects, expansions, as well as the latest game, Diablo 4. And so I thought this would be a more comprehensive volume to look over together. You can see Lilith on the front there. So I'm really excited to open this up and take a look at all of it with you. Diablo is a series that's been a part of most of my gaming life, and I still enjoy playing it. It's a comfort game for me, as strange as that might sound. I was just talking to my friend Kira about that, about how sort of horror games or grim type games can feel comforting. But I think if you think about it really, the kinds of seasons, the kind of weather that we tend to play these games in tend to be, the cold months when you want to curl up with a blanket, light some candles, maybe have a warm beverage and play, or around Halloween. Like those tend to be cozy times of year anyway. So also, when I think about what makes a game feel cozy, some of it is just nostalgia. Is this a world like the world of Sanctuary that I've spent a lot of time in my life? Is it a game I can share with people I really love and care about? Can I play it while I hang out with them and talk with them, whatever? And just in a straightforward sense, the world of Diablo is filled with so much fire, lights, braziers, things like that. And lots of, you know, um, lots of horror games tend to have like boiling cauldron sounds or fireplace sounds or extreme weather sounds that I just find very cozy. The sounds of books, right? Those like book sounds that I just love, the thumbing through old tomes and things. So I think it makes sense that it can be so cozy. But I haven't looked very closely at this book yet because I wanted to do that with you. So today we're just gonna explore it together, and I hope that will be really fun. So feel free to get really cozy, and we will look through the art of Diablo Volume 2 together. And I tried to make this one nice and long So I hope you'll really enjoy it. Okay, let's take a look inside. So here we are at the grim and gruesome world of Diablo, also known as Sanctuary. And Sanctuary is really the setting for the action in the Diablo universe. I will give a little bit of a heads up, although I haven't really thoroughly gone through this book yet, as I really wanted to do it with you guys. I can almost guarantee that there will be some imagery in it that is demonic and fairly gothic and creepy. So bear that in mind. I don't think there's anything terribly scary or anything, but if that kind of imagery bothers you, I completely understand. I have not let my son play Diablo yet, obviously, although I do play the Minecraft dungeons with him, which is a really suitable alternative. So if you're interested in a Diablo-like game, but you don't love the imagery of it or it feels too violent, I highly recommend the Minecraft Dungeons as a fun family-friendly version of a similar experience. I wanted to do this volume 2 of the Diablo art books, as I heard it's just a lot more comprehensive and it has better ratings overall. It also gives us a broader look at the entire Diablo story in terms of art direction, where it's been, and where it's headed. So this book includes art and explanations of content from Diablo 2, Diablo Immortal, which was the free-to-play game, and Diablo 4, as well as just some information bridging those games. So I noticed that they didn't include Diablo 3, and I thought that was interesting because that was probably the most universally disliked in terms of art direction. You can see from these opening visuals. Here we have a beautiful spread of Tristram is the kind of main pivotal city where a lot of the action, especially in the early games, hinges. So Tristram is a city in Sanctuary. But as I was saying, you can see that it's very dark, it's very self-serious. Most of the art is influenced by the duality of light and dark. So I don't know this for a fact, but I think a lot of inspiration in the art comes from artists like Caravaggio, Jan Vermeer, painters and artists who are very concerned with the placement of light. It's sort of the perfect merging of light and dark. And so you'll see that throughout. A lot of composition in shadow. And there was in the original Diablo, a sense of dread and darkness, but by Diablo 3, there was a real departure, and it became much more cartoonish, and so it was a bit brighter. The palettes were much more vivid. Some people would say even kind of lurid or oversaturated for a Diablo game. So the fact that they've left out Diablo 3 from this particular book doesn't necessarily surprise me, as it was such a departure from the rest of the series. So that said, I still enjoyed playing Diablo 3. I didn't play very much of Diablo Immortal. I don't love free-to-play platforms as much, so I can't speak in as much detail about Diablo Immortal as the other games, which I have played a whole lot of. But so we can see the title page here where it says Diablo and Blizzard, and we'll go ahead and pop this open so we can see the title or the table of contents. So this is King Leoric. I believe he was a king who was corrupted by Diablo, which is sort of what happens. And we can see the titles here of each section. There's Diablo 2 Resurrected, Hell and Back Again, Diablo Immortal, Shadows of the Past, Diablo 4, Return to Darkness, and then the Heart of Darkness, as well as acknowledgements. And if you haven't played Diablo before, it's an ARPG or an action RPG, a dungeon crawler, or a roguelike. So roguelike mechanics with real-time gameplay. And it takes place in Sanctuary, created by rebel angels and demons. This is a picture of Lilith, one of those rebels. Sometimes thought of as like the mother of what we think of as humanity in the game, the Nephilim, the children of the rebels who created Sanctuary. So demons and angels have thought to influence the Nephilim or humanity ever since. This is a beautiful character concept from Diablo Immortal, I believe. It reminds me of an Amano painting, actually, with the red, white, black, and the kind of the shape of it. Here we see a spread showing a lot of the player character classes. So each game gives you a chance to choose your character class and try to save Sanctuary. Each character class will have its own motivation typically, but ultimately they end up going on the same journeys throughout. So Diablo 2 begins as Diablo, the kind of baddest bad guy. The big bad has taken control of the warrior from the first Diablo, which is really cool. It's a really neat concept and has corrupted him. So you can see down here, they just give little bits of credit for talking about each and every piece of art throughout the book. So it's fun to go through and see which artist designed which concept and what those concepts represent. This one is showing a little bit more of the level design, which I love. You can really see here the use of light. In Diablo, they talk a lot about directing the characters or directing the players with light. So they often use fire to do that, especially in the burning hells and in dungeons. And you can see here that there's a bit of almost like a crucifix shape to the layout of the platforms. There's obviously a lot of religious imagery that is interwoven. Diablo is a really self-serious universe, and so it is never really that tongue-in-cheek, but it does blend its own kind of mythos and mythology with real-world understandings of the tensions between good and evil in a Christian paradigm. So here it talks a little bit about the decision to make Diablo 2 a fully 3D experience instead of just making 2D assets into higher res assets. They thought about going full 3D, and this was very ambitious and made a big change in the way the game looked and felt. Here you can see some of the designs early on for some of the characters in the game. And with Diablo, whether you're designing demons or the Nephilim, the humans, the angels, or any of the creatures, you have to think about scale, because very often the field is filled with characters, and a lot of people, myself included, like to play Diablo as a multiplayer experience. So each character, especially the character classes for players, need to look individual enough that you can tell them apart on a very chaotic field. And they also need to blend together in a way that feels believable and realistic for classes of warriors who would have a standard uniform or standard kinds of equipment builds, that kind of thing. So it's a pretty daunting task when you think about it that way. You can see, though, just how much detail goes into each and every one of these builds. You can see they're using similar palettes and things like that for the colors, but trying to find points of difference to give a sense of style and storytelling to each of these characters too. It says here color palette was really big for us. So at first, because we were taking that more realistic approach, it was more about the environment lighting. However, what we found was during our playtesting and over the course of development, it wasn't feeling enough like D2. We needed to hit really specific colors, especially on our monsters and our player classes. So that's a really good point. Also being consistent with what the Diablo brand was and what the expectation of players was. And I think that's where they hit more of a snag with Diablo 3, where they maybe embarked on too much of a departure from that, and players definitely did get upset about it, as you can imagine. Diablo 4 kind of brought those things back down a little bit, merging the styles, I would say, of 2 and 3, sort of merging them together. So here you can see some of the scarier, more horror-looking creatures, and it just talks a little bit about developing the look and textures of their skin, of their faces, and, there's a challenge in making, I think especially the demons, look both scary and monstrous, but also relatable, because of course the idea of good and evil is that it exists within everyone. So in order for evil to be effectively frightening, I think it has to seem human. It has to seem relatable in some way, right? We have to be able to see ourselves in it, or see the potential for evil in ourselves, so that we have so that we have the fear to fight against it, to be better than it, right? I think that's the entire idea of angels and demons. They have to relate somehow to humanity in order to be effectively instructive for us, if that makes sense. But these ones get to be much further from that. You can see these demons are not very human looking. So you can still see that they have the basic bodies and faces of humans, but what the art director here is talking about in the quote is that they are going from an 800 by 600 resolution on old CRT monitors to a 4K monitor size, and that increased the real estate that their characters had, and it meant that they had a lot more room for detail. And you can tell they really decided to get inventive with the shapes these demons would take on, as different demons can represent different kinds of evil, different sins, as it were. It's important that they can look different in terms of what point they happen in the game and what maybe battle against which prime evil or larger evil they lead up to. So these ones look a bit more like creatures, monsters, almost like a werewolf. These ones are looking a little bit more deformed, a little bit more gruesome, bulbous, rounded. Some of them look more muscular, but you can see that they here they list some of these ones. So for instance, this one talks about a demon concept, a mummy concept, a claw viper concept, and you can see that they look like everything from mummies to dinosaurs to scorpions, and they even become very elemental, of course. So here we have some fire demons. Here we also have an imp concept, and that's important. There's different scale for these two. There's small demons, very large demons, and everything in between. Skeletal types. And then we start to see some of their weapons and accessories, things like that. It's also interesting to notice that these are going to mirror some of the accessories and gear that you have as a player character, and a lot of these are going to also relate to the kinds of magic and mana use that you're going to exercise in different classes. So there's bone magic, blood magic, fire magic, those kinds of things. And so you'll see sometimes that those themes of materials and elements are carried out through all of the different equipment that you can get in the game as well. Of course, loot management is a huge part of any Diablo game, and some people really enjoy it and some people really detest it. I think that it's quite fun, but I tend to be pretty quick and tidy about it. I like this kind of morning star right here. These are all really neat. I don't tend to use a lot of melee weapons like these. I like classes like sorcerers and monks, mages that either use I like field management, so I like to use control through magic, those kinds of things. Here we have some really interesting design for some of the landscapes, and I just love like the swirls. If you can see some of the detail here, so much is happening in the darkness of these concept pictures and the shadows. So much of the land and the levels is actually the shadow itself, so it's like a negative space that you exist in as a player. Here you can see the streams of lava and things are most illuminated, the places where you actually cannot go because you're meant to exist in the darkness of it. And I love the levels of Diablo. The level design is one of my favorite parts. Here we have at the top the Talrasha tomb concept, the River of Flame concept, and at the bottom the Hellgate concept that we also saw earlier. The Hellgate is looking almost metallic in the center there, and molten at the same time. So now we're gonna look at some of the cinematics, and these at the time and even now, these are remastered, but these feel so impressive to me. Such an achievement. Some people dislike cinematics in games. I personally, because I grew up playing a lot of games in the 90s, the cutscenes and cinematics were, the time when you got the most beautifully rendered graphics, and they really made the game feel so immersive and theatrical. And so I loved them. I still love them. I know some people don't like to be kind of taken in and out, and I feel like you see them less and less in games, but I still am a really big fan of cinematics. So we're moving on now to the section Shadows of the Past. Shadows of the Past. So let's see what it says here. The storyline of Diablo Immortal is set 5 years after the events of Diablo 2, Lord of Destruction. The World Stone, the heart of creation, has been destroyed by Tyrael following its corruption by the prime evil Baal. The Archangel of Justice, Tyrael, had seemingly died in the ensuing chaos. And Tyrael is one of the more iconic characters from Diablo. You'll probably have seen his imagery almost as much as Diablo himself, and lately Lilith. But like I said, I didn't play a lot of this game, although it did seem like you could do a lot of the game without having to pay microtransactions and for extra currencies and things like that. So if you played it a lot, I'd love to hear your thoughts on it. I'm not against free to play, clearly. These are beautiful inspiration pieces here for some of the characters. And free to play can be an effective way of putting out games at times. Just not always my favorite. So, but let's take a look at some of the art anyhow. So again, Diablo 2 takes place after the fallout of Diablo 1, or just Diablo, and then Diablo 3, I believe, is 20 years after 2, so this is in the middle of that. We can see some of the beautiful art here. Again, we're looking at a lot of use of light and dark. I do think at this time, Blizzard was trying to explore the use of more light in the Diablo games and just bringing in more variety in general to try to really stretch what a Diablo game might look like, what it might feel like, what it might play like. So it's really, really interesting, and you can see lots of beautiful detail on the armor and on the mobs mobs, or well, on the bad guys, the demons. So we have some character class artwork here. We have Blood Knights, Crusaders, I think, Barbarians. And sometimes the character class will be called one thing in one game, like Sorcerer, and then changed to Witch or something like that. But they're usually the same basic types of character builds that you can then go on to customize further as you play. But we can just take a look at some of these classes. And again, I'd love to know what your favorite classes have been throughout each of the games. I tend to build my own character sort of depending on the people I'm playing with. If I'm going to be playing with someone who has a strong defense or long range capacity, I might go for more of like a glass cannon build where I have a little bit less defense but really, really, really strong ultimate damage. Or I might make something a little bit more balanced if I know that the people in my party are either not going to build balanced characters or complementary characters to mine, or if I just know maybe they're more independent. Some people work really well together, and some people kind of just go off on their own, and either is fine. It's just good to know what you're working with. So anyway, but yeah, I'd love to hear about what have been some of your favorite classes in any of the Diablo games, and on top of that, what you prefer in terms of, do you like to play by yourself? Do you like to play couch co-op? Do you like to log in and play online with friends? That kind of thing. So now we can see we're finally seeing some angel builds. Well, actually it says Shadok. So I actually don't know this character. I know it's talking about here that Diablo Immortal introduced some new characters, and these are some of the pre-visualization concepting sketches. Sometimes it can be a little bit disappointing because you think, oh, this could have been so neat. I remember thinking that with a lot of the art for Starfield, the Bethesda game. Some of the concepting or the pre-concepting visualization was incredible. Got me really excited. And then what was actually delivered fell so far short of that. But look at this. When you look at these, you can see so much conversation between light and dark, and you can see care taken to establish in both the characters of the high heavens and the characters of the burning hells that they are two sides of the same coin to some degree. Now, this is not an argument that is meant to offend anyone. This isn't rooted, I don't think, in conversations about real life religion. But in Diablo, the idea is that the angels in the high heavens are also susceptible to kinds of corruption. They are also susceptible to believing that they are just in their cause, and perhaps they are not always. And so you can see a lot of, again, this dualism between the high heavens, the burning hells, the primevals, not the archangels, that they have some things in common as much as they have things that are diametrically opposed, and that goes back to the design. You can see here the humans or Nephilim races are also made to be an amalgamation of not good and evil, but light and dark. And you can see that they are meant to have elements times that feel both grim and beautiful, both violent and gentle, right? Both appalling and appealing. And I love when they do these spreads and you can kind of see heroes and villains juxtaposed, because you start to see that there isn't just necessarily one or the other. Oh, I love I don't want to actually give away anything. I'm gonna try to avoid spoilers, but I love this wolf. I believe this is Ball, Ball. Is it? It's Baal, right? And I always forget how they say it. Sometimes they say like Baal, Ball. I can't remember. Anyway, I love I have a lot of love for all the prime evils because they are, they're really, most of the battles against them are always so much fun. I love boss battles. This is giving me very haunted mansion energy. And here it's saying that the biggest challenge is evolving while keeping to the feel of the IP. How many different ways can you design a demon? And I think that's exactly right, is for all the criticisms of Diablo games, I have to say one thing I love is the fact that even if they're not perfect, I think a lot of people would agree that Diablo 2 is maybe the height of the series. Oh, look at that one. These are so cool. Oh, look at this guy. I still think that it's wonderful to be getting new installments of Diablo in the 2020s. Diablo 4 wasn't perfect, but I had so much fun playing it nonetheless. So I'm just excited that they still, maybe if it doesn't feel completely fresh all the time, I think that they do keep creating experiences that feel fun. And to me, I know it might sound silly given the content, but they're really like a comfort game for me. I love to play Diablo and just talk and chat with people I love that I've played the games with for years. It just reminds me of everything I love about couch co-ops or having LAN parties growing up and that kind of thing. So, but anyway, so you can see here, these are some more concept designs, and these are getting into more armor heavy looks. And you'll notice that most of these designs with the armor and with players, they tend to be pretty top heavy, meaning a lot of the detail is going to be on the top of the character. The balance is going to be more toward the upper part of the body, because depending on your view and vantage point playing, you're almost always going to see those details and not so much the feet, the legs, the bottom part here. So again, this spread here is showing a layout and talking about the lighting again. The art director says with lighting it is exactly what it should be. Light the areas you want the players to go to. If there's a point of interest, make sure that it is recognizable, and you'll see that throughout, right? They use light as a way of directing you through these maps. The maps are procedurally generated, and so it can be a pretty overwhelming experience navigating Sanctuary. So the lights are very instructive. They guide you both literally and serve as a metaphor for the idea of the guiding light that is the motivation of each player character as well. So here we have some real details from the world. I know this is a little bit gruesome, but there is a fair amount of torment shown throughout the worlds. And here you see these incredible scenes, which are at sea, and yet they do seem somewhat consistent with the Diablo universe, right? It says here, when we first had our beta, people who looked at it would say, wow, it's almost too dark. The dark is so crushing. And they definitely grapple with that, making it dark enough to feel like Diablo, but bright enough that you can actually, navigate it. So now it's the next section. So Diablo 4 Return to Darkness, and it says Diablo 4 introduced a bold aesthetic that broke new artistic ground while maintaining the dark and dismal tones of past entries. A look and feel that was only discovered after a long journey of exploration. And they do talk a little bit more down here about finding the middle ground between Diablo 2, very sort of dark and true to form, and Diablo 3, which was again a little bit of a departure with more color, more light, more variety. Diablo 3 had lots of sections that were fully in the sunshine, in the daylight, and it was neat, but I do tend to agree that it didn't always feel as sinister, I guess. Obviously, these early witch class concepts do evoke one of the main characters of this installment, Lilith, a lot to me, just in terms of the costume work, the proportions of the body, the raised horns on the head. And so you can kind of see all of that here in the general shape of it. But we can see a lot of the different classes. So here we have the necromancer concept, rogue ritual tattoo concept, druid tattoo concept, rogue concept, and some class key art up there. And I have to say, I played Necromancer for my main playthrough of this game, and I think it was terribly imbalanced. It was a really fun class to play, and I think ultimately they nerfed it a bit because it was so unbalanced. But I had a really good time playing my Necromancer. I think it was the right choice. So this spread reminds me of the famous painting The Raft of the Medusa by Jericho. It has very similar structure with a very similar focal point and light, as well as the same concept of sort of all-out war among its characters. The Raft of the Medusa is in the Louvre, and it is very beautiful and devastating because it's based on real events, but I can't help but look at this spread and not think maybe that was the inspiration for it. But anyway, moving on. I could be completely wrong too. It doesn't say anything about that, so. But we're just looking more at some of the concepting art for some of the classes and what they look like. And you can see there's big scale differences. Some of them are very blurry and meant to accommodate heavy weapons and heavy armor, and some of them aren't. You can see they've even concepted the facial hair, the tattoos, the scars, things like that. And again, we're still seeing a lot of that almost religious imagery where there's like halos of light and things like that. Also, lots of imagery of horns and crowns, things like that in this game. Where we're talking about sort of like dominance of power and of ideology. Here's an early rogue concept, and I have to say this reminds me of the Art of Diablo to some degree. It looks a little bit foiled, and there's a lot of, again, play of shadow and nuance of light. So I tend to love playing a rogue character as well. I think rogues can be really, really fun. I didn't think the rogue build in this game was particularly great, but still a good time. So now we're getting to the heart of some of the iconography of Lilith. They really, I think, wanted to reinvent the avatar for the games to get away from Diablo and move toward using images of Lilith to sell this game and to sell the idea of this game. There's probably a lot of reasons in marketing for doing that, but I think part of it is just to reinforce a sense that this is a new installment, this is something different. We're exploring, the relationships of a couple of key characters in more depth than we have before. I love the swirlicking really head on at some of the faces here, and some snarling, but I don't know, anything that looks like a cute little wolf is good with me. There's a lot of fun wolf companionship in this game, if you will. So, okay, we've got kind of a triptych here showing some of the armor types, some of the builds, and you can see here that we have these pictures of heraldry and light that show kind of the reverence and cult-like mentality that exists within the Nephilim and who the humans gravitate toward in terms of, I guess, who they support, who they fear. And so again, another triptych kind of showing some of the characters and again showing us a little bit more of the gear. Right here, this is a design for Yorin in particular. This is just a beautiful picture. It feels again, so religious in nature. Oh, look at this one. This is a concept of, I believe, sort of the altar to return Lilith to Sanctuary. And if I recall, this is not exactly the direction they went with, but the elements are all there. The altar with all the candles, the disciple, all of that did end up going into the game, and it was really beautifully done. So again, we have some demons. You can see here, I think, a real inspiration from insects, from bugs. You start to see things like wings, antennae, things like that. And then other ones that feel a little bit more like traditional creatures of hell. With like a 3-headed dog, of course. These ones, again, I think like bloat flies and big worms and grub and And so you see that they really do try to, I think especially as you get further in the game, introduce new shapes and sizes and variations in where the demons take inspiration. Oh, but we have arrived at the most important part, of course. The horses. So, it says here, when the decision was made to make Diablo for open world, it soon became clear the player would need help traveling long distances. And so they introduced horses that you can summon very easily. There were some glitches with the horses. They weren't always the most perfectly engineered creatures in the game, but I loved them. They talk about how early on the designs were pretty grounded, but given the sort of madness of progression of the levels, to make the horses fit in, they needed to sort of up the ante on their sinister traits and also their level of detail. So here you can see a flower armor concept, not so sinister, a celestial armor concept, and you can see these from different angles. So those seem sweet and sort of heavenly, but to complement the more heavenly horses, you had to have more demonic horses, of course. So we have all of these different kinds here. They're all so cute. Oh, I just love them all. And I think it's neat how they're all so very different. I know that games have not always done well with horse armor in the past, but this horse armor was just fun and cosmetic. If I recall, I don't think it enhanced. Maybe it did. It's been so many months since I've played. This is like, they have like swamp-looking horses, more tournament-style horses. They have Hellfire mount concept, Flayed mount concept, Fallen mount concept, Vain Monarch Parade mount armor concept, all kinds of horses. And then, of course, all kinds of gear. You can't have a Diablo game without loot management, and there's so much of it. These staves and swords are really, really neat. One of my favorite things about going to Valve headquarters, which Valve has, of course, nothing to do with Blizzard, but and you can just see here some detail about the armor work. But at Valve, they have all of the the weapons used in their games. They've actually physically made them, and they have a room where they have them all up on the wall for motion capture purposes. So I wonder if Blizzard is the same. I'm trying to see if they say anything about it in the sort of the details here, but I don't see anything. Of course, it would be impossible to make every single one of these shields, amulets, gauntlets, but it is really cool that some of these things they do get actually made in 3D, and I think it's just fun to know. These are just some of the objects that exist in the world. Those are some of my favorite things. The just all of the little bits and pieces that keep Sanctuary feeling like a real lived-in planet. Right here it talks about the idea is that Sanctuary is meant to look like a place that, was once grand and has sort of fallen, has sort of been corrupted. Reminds me a little bit of the Star Wars universe. It's meant to look very lived in, the people of Sanctuary have seen a lot over the years, and it makes sense that most of their gadgets, most of their gear, most of their homes have seen better days. So these I love. Just again, giving the scale, the sense of scale of the world itself. It can be hard to glean all of the detail and all of the scale when you're playing the game, but just look at these. Even the stained glass is thought out. Especially with Diablo, it's so hack and slash that at times you can kind of mindlessly just hack your way through it. And it's nice to have the art to just take a look at everything that went into all of these monasteries. And this is the swamp region. I was a little disappointed in the actual swamp because it felt a little monotonous. It felt like the point in the game where things dragged a bit. But the actual, I think the variety in landscapes and things is always impressive to me. Again, it's like when they talk about the demons, how many dungeons can you make and still give them their own sense of flavor or their own individuality. It's difficult. And here again, some stained glass, some heraldry, some of the images in the game. Again, you create concept art for a game, but you also create art that goes directly into the game in forms of pictures on a wall, stained glass, carvings, things like that. And so this is talking about the expansion that I guess goes into the eastern jungles. I haven't played the expansion yet. I'd love to know if you have and if you recommend it. It's looking really beautiful. I know that opening up Diablo 4 in this open world format makes it so that it feels very, very, very big. And it makes it easier, I think, for them to add on. They also talk about, look at that, just to kind of appreciate some of the detail in case you can't quite see it. They talk about some of the difficulties making this game during the pandemic, how they had to sort of, a lot of them learn to work remotely and still make such a cohesive game. So there's some really interesting details in this book about the process as well. Look at that. It's really, really sprawling and beautiful. And you can see here that I feel like every Diablo game has a desert land, and then this is feeling very Lion King. This is their Hakuna Matata page. Just kidding. So, but it's neat to see some of the concept for the expansion. I wonder if you'll play it or if you have played it. And I would just love to hear your thoughts on Diablo in general, especially the look, feel, the aesthetic, the mise en scène. There's so much fog there, it's so pretty. Does Diablo to you still feel the same as it did? Has it changed? And is it a game that you'll keep playing if they keep making new installments? Either way, thank you so much for flipping through this book with me. Again, Diablo is such a comfort game for me, and so it's fun to share these things that feel unexpectedly cozy with you, I guess. But I just wish you all the best, and see you again really